Who's your favorite Marvel Comics hero? Mine is Superman. Remember the motto? With great power comes great responsibility.
There's an idea that I find incredibly troubling and confusing at the same time, and I'm sure you've heard this or even thought this yourself before, that Superman just can't have a good movie made about him, that Superman is just not that interesting of a character, he's too powerful, and whatever additional reasons you might have heard on why there just cannot be a compelling cinematic adventure featuring the Man of Steel. Now, I find this incredibly strange because this is a character that has existed in media since 1938. So since 1938, this guy has had stories written about him and he's still relevant to this day, but somehow there's a belief that live action movies, just not for him. They're just never gonna work. And now that we've had the announcement that J.J. Abrams, Mr. Memberberries himself, is teaming up with Ta-Nehisi Coates, a guy most notably known for writing about reparations of all things, are the guys that Warner Brothers decided should head up the reboot of The Man of Steel, I've decided that I can be silent no more. I've decided that this assault on our beloved Man of Steel shall no longer stand, and I've decided to tell you why you are under the false impression, if you are, that Superman cannot have a good movie made about him, by letting you know the common mistakes and misconceptions that have been perpetuated by the film franchise over the last 40, 50, God knows how many years, I can't do math, whenever that first one came out.
He'll kill her, Clark, and then he'll kill us all. Shake it off. Come back to us.
Now, there are mistakes in each and every live-action adaptation of Superman that seem to carry over into the comic books and back onto the big screen, but I have decided to cut out all the fat and trim it down to 3 things the next Superman movie would absolutely need to get right for it to work. And if they don't change these things, which they definitely won't, we will be perpetually having this conversation about how Superman, for some odd reason, just can't work as a movie. And those 3 things that filmmakers need to know that they always get wrong about this character are as follows. Number 1, Krypton does not matter. Number 2, Superman is not Jesus. And number 3, Brainiac needs to be the villain. Now, I can already tell that some of you are going to take issue with the list that I've laid out, but trust me, you're 100% wrong. And the thing that often brings up the most negative response when I bring it up is number 1, the fact that Krypton doesn't matter. Because the problem of overemphasizing Krypton has been an issue with the Superman character ever since the original Christopher Reeve movie. And the reason I'm highlighting this as a point of interest is because prior to this point, while Jor-El did exist while Superman was a Kryptonian, this was never really a key part of his character. It was only when Marlon Brando was cast as Jor-El hot off the Godfather franchise. For those of you who don't watch old movies, The Godfather was the biggest movie franchise in the world at that point. Did Jor-El's role start to expand in the movies, and then the comic books followed up on that by expanding him to be a more and more important figure. However, this runs contrary to the character of Superman. This runs contrary to what makes him an enjoyable person. You see, the thing that makes Superman Superman is not his Kryptonian origins. Again, he arrived on Earth as a baby with no memory of his home world. The thing that makes Superman Superman are the people who found him here on Earth, aka Jonathan and Martha Kent. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter where Superman came from or who his biological parents are. Hell, he could have been made in a lab and dropped off in the middle of a cornfield. What matters is that these 2 morally sound people, known as the Kents, grabbed him as a baby and raised him up to be the honorable person that he is today. Superman is a nurture story, not a nature story. And the more we shift focus away from the Kents and shift that focus toward Krypton and toward Jor-El, the more we disconnect with Superman, because although he's an alien, Superman is raised by the best in terms of moral virtue of the best humanity has to offer, which is why he is reflective of our best values. This is the basis, by the way, for a number of different Superman stories, most famously Superman Red Son. What if Superman actually landed in the Soviet Union during the Stalin era, instead of being raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent, middle America, salt of the earth, good as good can be people? He was raised in the Soviet Union, basically as an apprentice to Joseph Stalin. The reason that story works is because we all understand that Superman is a nurture story, not a nature story. That if he was raised by communist scum in the Soviet Union, he would turn out to be a horrible dictator, as what is produced in communist countries. But because he was raised by the most moral of the most moral, Superman reflects the best of society. And Superman Red Son is far from the only story that acknowledges how important the Kents are versus Superman's Kryptonian origins. The entire basis of the CW show Smallville revolved around this principle. In fact, they actually added in Lionel Luthor as a character in a way that he was never portrayed in the comics, so he could contrast his parenting of Lex Luthor and how Lex Luthor would eventually turn out with how Jonathan and Martha Kent raised Clark in order to be our hero, Superman. And it's not even just the overall premise that tells you this in that show. There are episodes that explicitly state this to you consistently. Like in the first season, when Superman switches powers with another student at his high school. This student, unlike Superman, is raised in an abusive home that are not very interested in protecting him and seek to profit on him when all of a sudden he gets all of these fantastical abilities. It is outright stated at the end of this episode that the greatest gift that Clark Kent actually received were none of the abilities that he has naturally on the planet Earth. It was finding Jonathan and Martha Kent and being raised by them, because this child, who had Superman's powers for about a week, completely melted down due to the pent-up anger he had from growing up in an abusive environment. Again, Superman is a nurture story, not a nature story. And I know a lot of people like to hate on the show Smallville because it's made for teens, and a lot of times their ambitions far outweighed their abilities and their budget. But give credit where credit is due. They got this right about the character. Also, they employed a crazy sex cult leader for 10 seasons. Look it up. Right? But it actually goes further than just this mistake in the character's origin, because when you overemphasize Superman's alien origins instead of his connections to Earth, it leaves the audience the impression that Superman is somebody who doesn't really care about the planet Earth. He has no real connection to humanity. He's just an alien that goes around saving people for some odd reason. And his only connection in any of these movies, because we don't have the crucial element of his parents, is Lois Lane. So he's this weird alien who's depressed because for some reason people think that that's a new and interesting take on Superman, despite that being the take on Superman in Man of Steel, in Superman Returns, in that Tim Burton Superman movie that never got made. They think this is a new and compelling take. It just doesn't allow us to connect with the character because we don't feel the humanity that should be coming off of this guy in droves. And even adaptations of characters deliberately made to be the opposite of Superman seem to understand the concept more than the people who are actually in charge of the character. Take Amazon's hit series The Boys. Their Superman anti is named Homelander. One of the most crucial things that you learn about Homelander is that although propagandistically he has the same origin and upbringing as Superman, in reality, he was raised in a loveless lab by a bunch of scientists, and this is why Homelander has the sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies that he actually does. Because when you have all that power essentially from birth and you don't have strong moral foundations, this is what you turn into. I mean, some of my favorite scenes in Superman, period, point blank, are situations where the Man of Steel finds himself in over his head and he decides that he needs to seek the advice of his parents because these are the people that he counts on for guidance. He's not some weird super alien god that broods and cries about everything. He's a farm boy from Kansas who seeks the moral guidance of the most moral people he's ever met in his life, Jonathan and Martha Kent. And this is something that is so wrong in the Zack Snyder movies, it's unbelievable. Now, I'm sure you've seen people rip apart the scene where Jonathan Kent is talking to like 12-year-old Clark Kent, and he tells him that maybe he should let people die in order to protect his secret, something that the moral and honorable Jonathan Kent would absolutely never do, and something that you should never do if you're raising an all-powerful alien, to think that their convenience, their life convenience, supersedes the lives of other regular human people. But one scene that doesn't get as much attention is this Martha Kent scene from Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice.
You don't owe this world a thing. You never did.
What? What's wrong with you? That is an all-powerful demigod-level alien that you're telling can do whatever he wants because he doesn't owe the world anything. Superman is supposed to inherit his strong will and his sense of honor from his father, Jonathan Kent, and he's supposed to inherit Martha's love and compassion. But that's not love and compassion, that's psycho talk, and that's how you raise an alien psycho. You're lucky you don't end up getting fried by Homelander, because that's who you're trying to turn your son into. What's wrong with you, Martha Kent? Now, I know some of you might think that I'm being a little bit harsh on the characterization presented in Man of Steel and other Superman movies, but this is crucial, because when you overemphasize Superman's Kryptonian origins, you are de-emphasizing his connections to Earth and thus making Clark Kent a worse character for it. This is one of the reasons why people say Superman is just not that interesting, because we never get his connections to Earth, which is crucial for us to understand Clark Kent. And despite what you might have heard from a Quentin Tarantino movie, Superman is Clark Kent. He's an Earthling. He just happens to have an alien origin. There's a great episode of Superman the Animated Series, which, by the way, is coming to HBO Max one day before the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, something I have no interest in whatsoever, where Superman is investigating and trying to clear a man who's on death row. But since it's Clark Kent's case, rather than flying the data over that proves that this guy is actually not guilty of the murder that he was convicted of, Clark actually drives it over because he wants this to be a victory for Clark Kent.
I suppose I could have flown to the governor as Superman and given him the disc, but that could have raised some awkward questions. Maybe there was some ego involved too. I wanted this to be Clark's victory, not Superman's.
However, unfortunately for him, the real killer has been following Clark Kent throughout the course of this story. So he plants a bomb knowing that he's found the crucial piece of evidence in his car. The bomb blows up, the car goes off into the water, and when Superman gets out of the car, he looks up and he sees a ship with somebody staring down into the water, meaning that he can't resurface. And for the world to see, according to this witness, Clark Kent has died. And faced with this situation where his very human ego has led him to, what does Clark do? He goes home and asks his parents for advice. And his parents, these pillars of virtue in the Superman universe, the guiding force behind his morality, tell him that if he can't be Clark Kent anymore, he can't be Clark Kent anymore. But there's a man on death row about to be executed for a crime that he didn't commit, and that needs to take priority over his personal problems. That's Superman. That's who this character is. Now, you might think I made my point here and I could just let this lie, but honestly, this is such a fundamental issue in all of the Superman movies that it goes even beyond the de-emphasis of the importance of the Kents. Because as we focus more and more on Krypton, which again, does not matter, Krypton just keeps getting more and more complicated despite the fact that none of the complications ever add anything to the character. Case in point, the entire opening scene of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. This scene, for some ungodly reason, is about 20 minutes long and it all takes place on Krypton. And what do we learn from this scene that's crucial to the character? Absolutely nothing except for absolute nonsense.
I warned you, harvesting the core was suicide. It has accelerated the process of implosion.
Our energy reserves were exhausted. What would you have us do?
I mean, honestly, did we really need to know that Krypton actually was destroyed because the space Republicans didn't listen when the scientists talked about climate change? Was the Superman mythos really enhanced by all of us knowing that Jor-El was essentially space Al Gore coming up against the same Republicans that we have to deal on Earth? Gosh darn, I hate those Republicans. Don't you hate those space Republicans?
These lawmakers, with their endless debates, have led Krypton to ruin.
And then there's the setup for Zod as the villain. Zod, who's also angry at the space Republicans for ignoring the warnings related to climate change, even though the space Republicans destroyed the planet by mining the core for energy, which is geothermal energy, which is often posited as a solution to fossil fuel crises. This still works, just ignore that part, because we're setting up for Zod as the villain, who's absolutely one of the worst villains in history. Now, I know that the second Superman movie back in the 80s had Zod as the villain, and thus he is seen as a more iconic villain, but you have to understand the limitations of the time. Superman has a whole host of other interesting villains that were just not able to be brought to the big screen at that time, and since Kryptonians are humanoids, they came up with Zod for the second movie. Not saying that the character didn't exist in the comics beforehand, just saying with the limited technology available then, even for this big budget movie, Zod seemed like a fitting choice at the time. However, now, it's just boring because we're just gonna end up seeing Superman fight a guy with his exact same powers, except evil, and the only way that he could defeat this guy is to throw him in the Phantom Zone, which is just not interesting, or kill him, and if he did that, that would make him not Superman. Oh my god. Now look, I'm gonna save that for part 3 because honestly, that's where the villain stuff goes, and that's not the worst of what's not being added through this expansion of the mythology around Krypton. The absolute worst thing that was added in is the Codex. This dark black skull that apparently the Kryptonians use to genetically engineer their babies at birth for the roles that they will perform in society. Again, the Codex, this edgelordy skull, is the crucial MacGuffin for this movie. Did we really need this in the movie? I know Zack Snyder's an edgelord and he thought that this black skull was gonna look ultra super cool, but did we really need to know that Superman's homeworld were essentially space Nazis that genetically engineered their babies for certain roles before they were even born? I mean, honestly, who thought this was a good idea? And what's even dumber about this, other than that this is a pointless aspect of the film that goes nowhere, that's totally unnecessary in every way, shape, or form, is that for some reason, this also leads us to learn that Kal-El, Superman, is the only baby in 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, or God knows how many years,
Krypton's first natural birth in centuries.
that was born naturally, making him the most specialist of all the specialist Kryptonians. Also, even though Jor-El made sure that his son was born naturally, making him the most special boy in the entire universe related to Krypton, really the only one who had the natural advantages to become Superman, he immediately undoes that by plugging in the Codex, the thing that he was trying to avoid because this thing engineers the babies, into his ship and infusing it into his naturally born Kryptonian son. So he has all the powers of a natural born Jesus baby with the magic skull thing that he was trying to avoid for some reason. 20 minutes into the movie and I'm already confused with this superfluous nonsense that adds nothing but more confusion. And that leads us to our next crucial issue with how Superman is portrayed on the big screen. And that's this weird idea that's gotten into the heads of almost every filmmaker that has touched this character in modern history, that Superman is somehow a Jesus-like figure. Now, I can only assume that somewhere, somebody who probably looks like this wrote an essay that said, Superman is kind of like Jesus, and the filmmakers just ran with it, even though it's completely ridiculous. Let me disabuse you of that notion. Despite the marketing campaigns of Man of Steel as a movie that you should go see with your church group, Superman is not Jesus. Once again, Superman is an Earthling. In fact, even in the 80s movies, they were smart enough to know this, which is why, even though I don't agree with it, they took the time to kill off Jonathan Kent. And the reason they killed off Jonathan Kent in those movies, in the manner that they killed him off, was specifically to answer the question of whether or not Superman is a god. You see, in the original 80s movies, Superman's father, Jonathan Kent, dies due to some kind of medical condition. A medical condition that Superman, despite all of his great powers, is completely powerless to stop. Now, while I always found it weird that right after his father dies, Superman says, "Good luck, Mom, attach yourself to a plow and figure out what to do with this farm. I'm off to Metropolis," I understand thematically how killing Jonathan Kent in this manner makes perfect sense. And as much as this works as a humbling experience for Superman as a character, this also explains why Jonathan Kent's death in Man of Steel via tornado doesn't work at all in any way, shape, or form. Because unlike a heart attack or cancer or any medical condition that Superman is ill-equipped to deal with, Superman could have easily saved Jonathan Kent in the blink of an eye. He just chooses not to because Jonathan Kent would rather die than be in this movie. And you could tell that even Zack Snyder, the edgelord that he is, the man who hates Superman more than any human person should that's in charge of the direction of the character, knew that this scene had a lot of problems with it. And one of the most obvious indicators that they knew that this was a ridiculous scene and that we didn't care about Jonathan Kent in the way that we should is what Jonathan Kent is doing that allowed him to be caught up in the tornado. And of course, I'm talking about Jonathan Kent saving a dog. Now, if you don't know, in movies, whenever a dog is involved, that is meant to basically manipulate the audience into having an emotional reaction because the characters and their interactions on their own are insufficient to generate that emotional reaction. People love dogs, and it's really easy to get the audience on your side if the character does something nice for a dog, and it's also easy to turn you against a character if they do something mean to a dog. So if Jonathan Kent or a villain in a Superman movie kills a dog, you're like, that's the bad guy because he hurt a dog. Dogs are innocent. Blah, blah, blah. Was this really a better way to kill Jonathan Kent? Because it didn't make me care about Jonathan Kent. It just made me think that Superman was a complete and total jerk. And again, if the purpose of killing Jonathan Kent is to show that Superman is mortal, he has limitations, he's not a god, this didn't accomplish that either. So the scene doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't humanize Superman even more because it's not a situation that was out of his power to control. And I don't feel bad for him that his dad died because, again, he could have easily saved him and maintained his secret without any issue whatsoever. He just chose not to. So now I'm left with a guy who has a Jesus complex but is cruel and is willing to put his own self-interest above people that he supposedly should love. The people that raised him from birth, never turned him into the government, and theoretically had always been good to him. Now, I hate to repeat myself, but unfortunately the second verse is going to be the same as the first. Because again, this connection with Superman and Jesus is just like the issues presented by the overemphasis of Krypton. It further distances Superman from humanity. It further disincentivizes us from caring about Clark Kent as a character, which is crucial for us to get invested into a movie. We have to kind of get along with the main character. We have to like them. We have to respect them. We have to understand them. We have to not see them as this weird alien that's willing to let people die arbitrarily because he's more concerned about himself, especially when you're making a movie about, Earth's greatest hero. Also, they go hand in hand. When Superman is presented as this more disconnected Jesus-like figure, that makes it necessary for you to emphasize Jor-El as this godlike figure in order to guide his son on the world that he sent him to. Furthermore, when you do the Superman is Jesus destiny thing, it creates problems with his origin story on Krypton. Again, Krypton blows up, the people send him to Earth because they're his parents and they love him, and he's raised by the Kents and he just happens to become a hero. That's the Superman mythos. This whole idea that it's like destiny or it was Jor-El's plan for him to become the leader of the human race is all nonsense, because if that was his plan, why did he wait for his planet to be on the verge of exploding in order for him to do that? This comes off as a desperation play in its original intent, and now it's portrayed as some kind of a plan, which just makes Jor-El seem even more cruel, because if he could have a plan to save people from Krypton, why didn't he try to save more people than just his only son? It all taints the mythology of Superman by adding all this extra superfluous nonsense. It's actually contradictory to the main goals of the character, to what people like about him, to keep emphasizing how different and godlike he is, and how smart Jor-El is, and how Jor-El planned everything, because it makes the Kryptonians seem like worse people, and it makes Superman, by extension, seem more separate and a worse person to us.
And I can't figure out how some yokel from Smallville is suddenly getting every hot story in town.
Well, Lois, the truth is, I'm actually Superman in disguise, and I only pretend to be a journalist in order to hear about disasters as they happen and then squeeze you out of the byline.
You're a sick man, Ken.
And finally, we get to our last issue, and that is the villain of the movie. The villain of a Superman reboot should be Brainiac, the brain interactive construct, the robot version, not the goofy alien who's putting cities in bottles version. Brainiac is an absolutely awesome villain that's never used in the movies, despite the fact that he is clearly the best fit for what a modern audience wants to see. Now, I already talked about the problems with the Kryptonians ad nauseum earlier throughout this video, and I talked about how battles with Kryptonians are just uninteresting because both characters have similar invulnerability, and they will ultimately lead to one of two outcomes. Superman throwing the Kryptonians in the Phantom Zone, or God forbid, yet another repeat of Superman killing one of his villains in his first movie. It's an absolute disaster. Also, I know a lot of people are saying Lex Luthor, but here's the thing. The movies have shown us no ability whatsoever to be able to do Lex Luthor in an interesting and compelling way. If you watch the Superman movies, Lex Luthor is either a goofy real estate person, or he's this weird Mark Zuckerberg loser in whatever Zack Snyder was going for with this Jesse Eisenberg interpretation.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
Luthor is none of these characters. Luthor's actually a compelling and interesting villain. Luthor is a dominating force. Luthor is somebody who views himself as Superman, and he hates Superman because he comes off as superior to Luthor's abilities. He outshines him in the public when Luthor thinks the world should be looking up to him.
Of course, if you don't like those terms, you'd better stop me now while you still have a chance. But you'd also better remember what happened to poor Goldface.
So while I love Lex Luthor, and we deserve a much better Lex Luthor than the ones that we've been offered on the big screen, I have no faith that in a first run in a reboot of Superman, we will ever see a capable, compelling, interesting version of this character. But fear not, because Brainiac is actually my perfect setup for a future Lex Luthor villain. But we will get to that momentarily while I explain that Brainiac is the absolute perfect villain for a Superman movie. The reason Brainiac is the absolute perfect villain to go with in a Superman movie is that at its core, having Brainiac as the villain of your movie serves a desire of Superman fans that they've always wanted to see. Gone are the days where we can watch a Superman movie on the big screen where he doesn't throw a punch. That 1980s Christopher Reeve movie has its place, I respect it, but you have to acknowledge that we can't have that in the modern era. We need Superman to be able to destroy things in big action sequences in these big movies. And since Brainiac is a robot, we are going to be able to see that if he is the villain of Superman in a movie. Also, Brainiac is somebody who challenges Superman in a different way than he is typically challenged in these movies. In the same way that I hate the action figure battle, this Dragon Ball Z nonsense at the end of Man of Steel, this is not the only way we're going to see Brainiac versus Superman, because Brainiac is a living computer. He's a machine. Intellect is his greatest weapon. He can build himself strong bodies to fight. He can make an army of Brainiacs. He can do all this crazy stuff. But first and foremost, Brainiac's principal strength is his brain. Obviously. Brainiac necessitates that Superman use something other than brute force in order to beat him. Also, Brainiac can serve as a way to eliminate the crutch that Kryptonite has become in these movies, because Superman has other weaknesses. One of my absolute favorite fights that Superman has engaged in of all time is Superman versus Captain Atom when Captain Atom was using red solar radiation.
Control radiation, Superman. That includes red sun radiation.
AKA the radiation that matches the sun on Krypton, which unlike the Earth's sun, isn't absorbed by Superman's body, allowing him to generate his fantastical abilities. Brainiac is the perfect character to be capable enough to analyze Superman's abilities, analyze where they come from, and figure out that red solar radiation is the solution to be able to battle Superman. He could attach the red solar freaking blasters or whatever to his robot body. He can build prisons to hold this man in. The point is, we can do without the crutch of kryptonite, which absolutely cripples Superman, while still having engaging and interesting battles with the character. Furthermore, Brainiac can help set up other characters in Superman's universe that are critically underdeveloped, like Lois Lane and Lex Luthor. Now, you wouldn't know this if you were watching just the Zack Snyder versions of Superman that have been put on the big screen, but Lois Lane isn't the most boringest human person ever to exist in the world of cinema. She's actually an incredibly intelligent and interesting character. In fact, the three pillars of strong personalities in the Superman universe are Superman, Lex Luthor, and Lois Lane.
Now that I'm as normal as you, Lex, I wonder if you'd grant me one last request.
And that is...
Thank you.
Each of these characters have distinct personalities, they have their own set of beliefs, and they have their own moral principles which can come into conflict throughout the course of the movie, and Brainiac is the absolute perfect villain to highlight the distinctions between these characters. Now, how might be the question you're asking yourself right now, but just think about it. Traditionally, Brainiac has a pattern. He infiltrates a planet, gathers all of the crucial knowledge on the planet before he destroys the planet, because again, knowledge is at its most valuable when it's at its most rare.
The fewer beings who have the knowledge, the more precious it becomes.
Lex Luthor is somebody who sees himself as the man of tomorrow. He sees himself as the solution. He believes that none of the problems of humanity are beyond his own intellect in order to solve. Lois Lane is a civil libertarian. She believes in individual rights. She's against things like the security state. And Superman is straight Americana, truth, justice, and the American way. It's not just a saying, it's actually represented in his beliefs and his actions. Since Brainiac's mission is to infiltrate a planet, gather all of the crucial information of that planet, and then destroy it, how about as a mechanism to accomplish that mission, Brainiac poses as a human scientist and takes a job at Luthor Corp, selling Lex Luthor on the security system of tomorrow, aka the Brain Interactive Construct. Luthor, seeing this AI security system as the solution to many, if not all, of the world's problems, becomes the pitchman and gets Metropolis to agree and be the beta tester of the Brain Interactive Construct security system. Lois Lane, the civil libertarian, views this as a threat to our civil liberties.
For 2 years, you don't know?
Here we go.
The world's in permanent lockdown, free speech is all but dead, and you don't know what's wrong?
She thinks that Lex Luthor has gone full 1984, and she begins investigating the scientist that Brainiac is posing as. We'll just go with Milton Fine because that's the only human name I've ever found being used as an alias for Brainiac, to figure out what his story is, and throughout the course of that investigation, she finds that the digital records are constantly updating in order to confirm that this guy is totally on the straight and narrow and perfectly normal. But Lois, being the journalist that she isn't fooled by this idea of the perfect image for this perfect scientist pitching this 1984 system. So she begins running down these leads outside of the digital space and starts tracking down the people and the physical records of Milton Fine in order to figure out whether or not this person is actually legit. What she comes to find over and over again is, despite what the digital records say, despite what the computers that we're putting all our faith in say, there is nobody who can independently verify any of this information, and there's no paper backups to any of this. Now, this plays into our fears about technology, on whether or not we should put all of our faith in it. Lois Lane obviously is in the camp of we shouldn't do that, despite the fact that she is shown throughout the movie to be a technology addict, because again, Lois has personality, she's entertaining, she's energetic, she's engaging, so she's gonna have contradictions in her personal life, but she knows what she believes and she won't ever let go of a story when she gets a whiff of it. And Superman, of course, is representative of the contrasting values between this big brother police state and what we are supposed to believe in the United States of America. He represents a different path forward to our security, truth, justice, the American way. He's an individual that is protecting us because he believes that it's noble, but he's doing so without taking over in the same way that the brain interactive construct is. Now, it's important to note that this is a premise. It's not a fully fleshed out idea. I expect that the creative types that are being put in charge of the next iteration of Superman to take this groundwork based on the knowledge of the character that I'm trying to lay out throughout this video and run with it and actually make it a whole complete idea. That being said, I would absolutely love at the end point of this movie for us to have a battle that is waged on two fronts. Obviously, Superman is going to have to confront Brainiac in a physical way because Brainiac is also a physical threat to Superman. But it would be really awesome if at the end of the movie, he was teaming up with Lex Luthor, who wants revenge on this computer system that is wreaking havoc on the company he spent his life building. And Lex Luthor is trying to take down Brainiac from the inside. I think this not only works in this movie to demonstrate exactly how big of a threat Brainiac actually is, and it highlights the attributes of both characters, but it also will lead to the end point in the movie where Superman gets all of the credit for the destruction of Brainiac. However, Lex Luthor gets all of the blame because he made himself the public face of this new security system that went so horribly wrong. And when you add in, and I know I said Krypton didn't matter earlier in the movie, but it's okay, you can use it minimally, this is not a contradiction, that Brainiac's origin is actually Kryptonian and he's the original AI on Krypton that allowed that planet to be destroyed. Lex Luthor, knowing that, thinks that Superman is the one who set him up this whole time in order to supplant him. Now, I know we're just used to the idea that Lex Luthor hates Superman because Lex Luthor is the villain of Superman, but wouldn't it be great if we actually had a reason for why he hates him? Wouldn't it be great if we actually felt sympathetic to those reasons, if we could understand where he's coming from, and thus we are more sympathetic to the horrific actions to come later in the franchise because we know the origin point and we might feel the same exact way about the Man of Steel if we were in his own shoes? I also like the idea, and I know, let me preface this with some of you are not going to like it, that Lois Lane and Lex Luthor are an item at the beginning of the movie, and throughout the course of the events of the first film, they end up splitting up, and Lex Luthor can see her going more towards Superman, so he feels like the deception and the robbery of everything that he holds dear in his life is even more personal. Again, you don't have to take it, it's just an outline, but I think it works, and it makes Lex Luthor that much more sympathetic at the end of the film, but again, you can agree to disagree on that aspect of it, that's up to you. Also, you 100% need an end credit scene where a bunch of people in Luthor Corp hazmat suits are going over a debris field, and they end up finding the smallest piece of Brainiac, and Lex Luthor takes it to experiment on it. Just saying, you need it. That's non-negotiable, non-optional. It's absolutely perfect. Opens the door up for a whole world of possibilities in the future movies. Maybe Brainiac fused Luthor, if we're lucky. But again, that's neither here nor there. Now look, while I've enjoyed making my case to you on what would work in a Superman movie, I am not hopeful that we are going to get to this in the next reboot or even the one after that. Like I said at the top of the video, J.J. Abrams, the guy who can only do references and member berries, and since the past Superman movies are the problems with the current IP, references and member berries aren't going to be a solution, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, the reparations guy, as if the one thing that Superman actually needed was more social commentary about race, are working on the next installment. There is no hope. Superman, for all intents and purposes, on the big screen, is dead. And even if we never get the Superman movie I actually want to see on the big screen, At some point, we might find out
the world didn't really need a Superman, just a brave one.